Our next question comes from Bob Ross 900, who says, "Hi Ramsey, what are your thoughts on fasting, meditation, and prayer?" My thoughts on fasting, meditation, and prayer. Well, let's start with prayer, because as far as a religious practice, fasting doesn't make a lot of sense without prayer. If you're doing it for health reasons, that's a whole different issue, but since you lump those three together, prayer, fasting, and meditation, let's look at this from a spiritual perspective. So from a spiritual perspective, fasting doesn't make sense without being accompanied with prayer. Otherwise it's just a physical thing. And one of the purposes of fasting is to transcend the physical. It's to deny yourself of your animal needs of food and sometimes water if you do a dry fast. This is something I do once a month for religious reasons, a 24-hour fast without food or water accompanied by prayer. And I hope that doesn't sound like I'm bragging, saying I'm holier than thou, because Jesus himself said, "Be not as the hypocrites who screw up their faces and they're like, oh, look, I'm fasting, everyone, look how holy I am, ooh," because they already have their reward. Yeah, that's in the Bible. But, when you fast, Jesus said, wash your face, look pleasant, put on some nice clothes, don't make a big deal out of it. Don't let people know that you're suffering inside. And your Father in heaven, who sees in secret what you are doing, shall reward you openly. And what's that reward we're talking about? It's a spiritual reward. I mean, maybe it's within the realm of possibility. Maybe God can reward you or bless you with something physical in return, but the reward for fasting, in my experience, is augmented communion with God. Denying ourselves of the physical for a time in order to more deeply understand the spiritual. Meditation, at its simplest form, the most base definition of the word, simply means to think deeply about something. And there are many practitioners of Eastern religions who will say, no, meditation is a very specific thing where you empty your mind and don't think about anything. And look up the word. The most basic definition of that word is to think deeply about something. In the Old Testament, the prophets taught, meditate day and night. Meditate day and night upon the words of the Lord. And if we are simply to turn our mind into a vacuum where nothing is going on there, how the heck are we supposed to meditate upon something, right? Yes, you can meditate upon something. That is the most base definition of the word, to think deeply about something. If you're not meditating in that sense on a regular basis, every single day of your life, at some point, you're doing something wrong. Think deeply about things, guys. One of the silliest, stupidest, most non-productive things that people often say to each other is, "Don't think too hard about it, bro. Don't think too hard about it. You think too much about things." Which is something I hear a lot in my life. You think too much, man. Is it possible to think too much? Preferable to the alternative, not thinking at all and doing stupid things and making silly mistakes because you gave no thought to the direction your life was going in. Man, think things through before you say them. Think things through before you do them. Put a little thought in your action, and your actions become much more meaningful. So going back to prayer, prayer is crucial to me. It's crucial to me because there is a God in heaven who is my Father, in whose image I was created, who is the literal Father of the spirit that inhabits this body, and yours too. And that divine being has a vested interest in the welfare of his children, in the same way, or at least a very similar way, as far as we can understand it at this point, that we as mortal humans have a vested interest in the welfare of our own children. At least we should. And if you don't, repent and fix that. Pay attention to your kids, guys. I don't think of prayer as a symbolic thing. I think of it as a literal thing. I'm literally talking to a being, to a person who is listening. And it's a two-way communication street. I'm listening to a being, to a person who is communicating back. Because if you miss the two-way communication in prayer, boy, are you missing out. I've had a few people contact me with spiritual concerns about God and prayer, and say things along the lines of, well, I spent many years trying to believe in God, trying to believe in Jesus and scriptures and prayers, and calling out to heaven saying, hey, God, what's up? I can't hear you. And he never answered back. And so I don't know what to think about that. How can I communicate with the Almighty if I can't hear his voice? There's a story in the Book of Mormon. Maybe you're not familiar with that. The Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ, one of the scriptures of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, another testament of Christ in addition to the Bible. There's a story there where there's a young prophet named Nephi, and he has two older brothers who are not very nice guys, Laman and Lemuel. And Laman and Lemuel, man, they are kind of the antithesis of Nephi. They are the primary antagonists of this story. They're always trying to get their little brother. They're like, man, our little brother thinks he's better than us. And he thinks God's always talking to him and he's seeing angels and stuff. He thinks he's better than us and we'll show him. They're always trying to tie Nephi up and toss him into the sea and kill him and torment him. And at one point, Laman and Lemuel, they mellow out a bit. They stop trying to pick on their little brother. And they listen to him for a bit. And Nephi says, you guys need to repent. And you need to pray. And you need to talk to God. And God can show you the same things that he's shown me. Nephi is a visionary man. He's seen visions. He's received visitations of angels. He's seen miracles. Laman and Lemuel have not been privy to these things in their lives. And they come back to him after a while and they're like, dude, we asked, we prayed, and God isn't talking to us like he's talking to you. And Nephi said to them, he said, guys, you took no thought save it were to ask. you took no thought, save it were to ask. And somehow you expect miraculous results from simple lip service. How do you communicate with a person? Now, you can say words to that person might say words back. You might say, hey, how are you? How's it going? To somebody you don't know, and that person might say, oh, I'm fine, how are you doing? And we feel like we've communicated. Hey, back to you. But not really. What do you know about that person? Nothing. Other than they're, a sociable enough person that they'll say, hey, back to you, as opposed to hissing like some sort of psychopath. But what do we really know about that person? And you can have a longer conversation. You can have a lot of lip service. Let's take dating, for example. Have you ever had the experience of dating a girl and you think, man, this girl is pretty, this girl is special, and you spent several months trying to get to know this person? You go on dates, you're always putting on your best behavior. She's always putting on her best behavior. She's putting on her makeup, getting her hair done, dressing up nice for you. And as the relationship goes on, then she starts to show her human side, and you start to show your human side. And sometimes you don't like that human side, and you're like, dang, she's not who I thought she was. Ugh. And suddenly you're not so magically Twitter-pated anymore. And so you think, maybe it's best I move on. Or she dumps you because she's feeling the same way. This happens. How long did that take? It takes a long time for people to really get to know each other before they're really communicating. A long time. Man, I've been married to my wife for over, how long? 15, 16 years, something like that. And I'm learning new things about her every day. I'm learning to communicate with her more efficiently every day. It's one thing to hear sounds coming out of somebody's mouth, and it's a whole different thing getting to know someone and really communicating with them. And understanding God, it really isn't that much different. You can say words, like you can speak to God. You can speak to God in faith, believing that He's listening to you. You can bow down and be reverent and all of these things. And maybe you'll feel warm fuzzies in your heart. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll feel like you're hearing a still small voice whispering to your soul. Maybe you won't. But if all you do is think, if I say the words, I'll get the result, you don't understand how communication happens. Every physical process that happens in this life, in our bodies, is representative of the eternal world. Because we take these with us ultimately. Through the resurrection of Christ, we are resurrected. Consciousness manifests itself through a physical body. This is absolutely true. Absolutely true. Think about it. There have been supercomputers, advanced artificial intelligences, that have beaten the world's best chess champions. Remember Deep Blue back in the day, who beat Garry Kasparov, one of the greatest chess players who's ever lived? And they fed this supercomputer information about Garry Kasparov, his games, the patterns that he used until the computer was able to beat him. And then they developed a superior artificial intelligence that managed to outperform Deep Blue. And I believe the process was something along the lines of, they taught the computer the rules to the game of chess and had the computer play itself in games of chess for about an hour at some ludicrous speed of multiple games every second, until the computer mastered chess and then could beat not just any human chess player in the world, but any other supercomputer in the world. But then they built another AI chess playing system where instead of teaching it the rules of the game, they let the computer figure out the rules of the game for itself. It let the computer teach itself what it believed the rules for chess were. And then that computer played chess with itself for about an hour and then outperformed the previous supercomputers. And of course, no human could touch that in chess. And this computer went on to beat the world Go champions. And Go is a much more complex game, apparently, than chess, as far as developing artificial intelligence able to beat the best Go champions. And this one, boom, licked them all instantly. So we're able to create these artificial intelligences that can not only beat humans at chess, not only learn or be taught the game of chess, but extrapolate the rules of the game for themselves, and based on that information, beat us at that and pretty much anything else they decide to, or we allow them to. But we still can't make robots that do menial human tasks. I mean, sure, some tiny little ones, but tasks that require a modicum of actual intelligence. Let's say, I don't know, be a cashier at a store, and somebody comes in and they've got some customer service issues where they'd like to speak to the manager, for example. Or you've got a waiter at a restaurant, or somebody bussing tables, or really just any task that seems pretty simple, some minimum wage job, but it requires a modicum of intelligence and allows you to adjust the conditions on the fly based on any number of subtleties and variables and minutiae. And robots couldn't do that. But there were some geniuses. What university was it? Dang, I don't remember. But there were some geniuses who had this idea. Let's scrap that whole idea of trying to put a supercomputer inside of an android body, because that's not working right now. We can't create this android to bus tables and do minimum wage work and replace menial jobs yet. And they built some little robot worm that scurried around and gave it one simple directive, which was to scurry away from light. So in the presence of light, it would seek out darkness. It would just scurry away, try to crawl away and get to a place that was dark. And that was it. And it was successful. And based on this, there have been significant developments as far as robotics and nanotechnology, etc., to create these smaller systems that have simpler tasks put together to create more complex tasks, such as scurrying away from light in order to create a more complex system, kind of like how we have on-off switches creating digital code in the first place. What did we learn from that whole aside about robots and AI? The most complex supercomputers that beat people at chess and Go, they're really good at performing those tasks, but they have no consciousness, so to speak of. They can't manifest consciousness because they have no physical body like you or I. This tiny little robot worm that scurries away from light, as unintelligent as that is, in a very real way, exhibits infinite more consciousness than the world's greatest supercomputers, because it's moving. And it has a very simple directive that it is manifesting. All right, here's what that has to do with you. You inhabit this body, this biomechanical machine, if you will, this biomechanical suit you're living inside of, that is infinitely more complex than the little robot worm that scurries away from light. And you exhibit your consciousness. You prove your consciousness through your actions. through your faith. Faith is an action word. It is not simply blind belief. It is acting upon your belief. I believe there is light that I don't like shining on me, and so I will scurry away from it. So even this artificial being, this little robot worm, exhibits a measure of faith, if you will, in that context. And so God has commanded us to pray, not to change His will, but to ask for blessings that He is already willing to bestow upon us, predicated first by our faith, through our actions, through our willingness to act upon that belief, to use our physical body to manifest consciousness. And when we commune with God, God can manifest His consciousness also through the medium of your physical body, meaning we can feel it. Or in some cases, maybe we can see it, or maybe we can hear it. Visions and angels and miracles, etc. Sure, that stuff happens. It has. That might sound crazy to some of you, but man, a miracle is in the eyes of the beholder. I mean, think of the story of Lot in the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. This is an interesting story because it says that some angels came to visit Lot in his house. And Lot recognized these were angels. These were messengers from God. And the people of the town gathered around the house, and they said, "Hey, we saw two guys go in that house. Send them out here." The people didn't see angels. They saw a couple of guys. They didn't see a miraculous visitation from heavenly beings. They saw a couple of guys. Whereas Lot, with the particular faith that he had, saw angels. So that's a fascinating story to me, because generally when we think about miracles in the Bible, we hear stories about Jesus walked on the water. Hey, that's not something we see every day. That's miraculous. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Okay, that's miraculous. We don't see that every day. But the angels that visited Lot, two groups of people saw them. Lot and his family recognized the miracle, and the people of the town, the wicked people of the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, saw them, and they just saw a couple of guys. They didn't see the miracle. So miracle it's a matter of perception. And perception is entirely based on context of experience. And context of experience in general, is entirely based on how we manifest our consciousness through our physical body. Which is why a physical body is so incredibly important. And to me, it is so incredibly important to understand that God Himself is a resurrected being with a physical body. That when Jesus Christ rose from the dead and said in the book of Luke in chapter 24, when doubting Thomas was thinking that he had seen a spirit before him, Christ said, "Handle me and see, for a spirit hath not flesh and bone as you see me have." And they thrust their hands in his side where the spear wound was, and felt the prints of the nails in his hands, and realized that he had a physical body once again. And it was the same physical body that he had during his mortal ministry, resurrected once again, as evidenced by those marks which he bore at that time, to show them as absolute proof of that miracle. And yet, another interesting thing about that story, before that moment, there was a record in the Bible of some of the apostles, after the resurrection of Christ, before they knew it, before they knew he had been resurrected. And they're walking along the road, and they come across the resurrected Christ, but they don't recognize him. They see him as some guy, and they talk for a while. And it wasn't until later that they realized who they were talking to. At first they didn't see the miracle, and later they recognized it. Their perception changed. Prayer is important, but it is super important to understand who and what you are praying to and why. A prayer, if it is just a vague wish sent out into the ether, like a message in a bottle, hoping that someone somehow may hear it. Compare that to speaking directly to an actual being that you know personally, that you have established a long-term relationship with. There's a massive difference there. Work toward the latter. Thanks for your question. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments down below. I do read your comments. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and pray.